Watch Plato's dark warning on female desire and why men fall first.
Have you ever felt that subtle pull? The one that makes you question if you've been building something long before anyone else appeared in your life? Imagine a man standing before a door he doesn't remember starting, yet somehow knows he built himself. Every glance that lingered too long, every memory replayed at night, every quiet moment of loneliness added another layer of wood, another strip of iron. On the other side of that door stands a woman he hasn't truly met. Still, he's convinced she holds the missing piece inside him. He gives that belief a romantic name. He calls it chemistry. Plato might have called it something else. A trap. For most men, desire doesn't ignite the moment they see a woman. It begins much earlier, in the silent, formative years, when they slowly learn to confuse being chosen with being worthy. By the time a woman finally appears, he's no longer looking at another person. He's staring at what feels like an escape from his own emptiness. That's why men often fall first. Not because women possess some mystical power, but because many men are already halfway surrendered before anyone even reaches for them. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever noticed this pattern in yourself or someone else? Drop your thoughts in the comment box below. Plato observed this again and again. He watched men elevate beauty to something sacred, only to crumble when that beauty turned away. What struck him wasn't weakness of the body, but weakness of vision. Men didn't see women clearly. They saw reflections of their own hunger staring back at them. That's why desire, in Plato's eyes, was dangerous. Not because it was immoral, but because it turned men into believers of their own illusions. Picture yourself inside one of Plato's dialogues. Oil lamps flicker. Shadows tremble across stone walls. Men debate love, virtue, fate. A young man speaks up and says, "When I see her, I feel complete." Plato would calmly ask, "Are you certain you love her? Or are you in love with the part of yourself you abandoned long ago?" This question sits at the heart of his warning. When a man desires a woman, he doesn't simply feel attraction. He remembers something, not a person but an ideal, a shape of perfection formed by stories, films, fantasies, long absences, and old pain. His mind weaves all of it together and drapes it over the first woman who fits the outline. She smiles in just the right way, laughs at the perfect moment, holds eye contact a second longer than expected, and suddenly, she's no longer just herself. She becomes everything. Plato would call this idolatry, not of the good, but of what a man believes will finally make him feel whole. Men fall first because they mistake beauty for destiny. A single glance can trigger an entire narrative. How they'll meet, how she'll recognize his potential, how she'll be different from the ones who hurt him, how she'll never betray him, how she'll somehow redeem all his past suffering. She hasn't even spoken yet, but in his mind, she's already become the answer. Plato wrote about lovers who believed they had found a soulmate, when in reality, they had only discovered a mirror for their own longing. Desire itself isn't the danger. The danger is that desire erases detail. It transforms a complex human being into a symbol. And you can't love a symbol without eventually resenting the reality that fails to live up to it. So what does this look like in real life? He meets her. She's human, inconsistent, sometimes warm, sometimes distant. But he doesn't register the complexity. He filters everything through his fantasy. The way she looks at him when he makes her laugh. The softness in her voice when she's tired. A passing comment about wanting a simple life, which he uses to override every sign that she thrives on chaos. He gathers evidence that supports the dream and quietly deletes anything that threatens it. Plato would say he's no longer in love with her. He's in love with the cave wall. You remember the cave. Prisoners chained, staring at shadows cast by firelight, convinced those shadows are reality itself. This is what desire looks like when it goes unchecked. The woman becomes a moving shadow, and the man refuses to turn toward the light, because doing so would mean admitting he invented half of what he feels. Men fall first because they willingly surrender to the shadows. Plato offers another image: the chariot, two horses pulling in opposite directions, one disciplined and noble, the other wild, hungry, and impulsive. The charioteer's job is to hold the reins and steer without crashing. The noble horse is reason, ethics, clarity. The wild horse is appetite, lust, emotional intoxication. Watch how many men handle desire. The moment a woman triggers something intense, the wild horse bolts. It drags the entire chariot toward her. Reason becomes secondary. Red flags are ignored. Routines are abandoned. Ambitions are delayed. Values are compromised. All to remain close to the feeling he's labeled as love. Plato would say the charioteer has fallen asleep. That's why some men become strangers to themselves when they fall for someone. Their schedules change. Their friendships fade. Their principles soften. They stop leading their own lives and begin orbiting hers. If she pulls away, panic sets in. If she comes closer, discipline collapses. His emotional weather now depends entirely on her behavior. Plato's question would be simple and unforgiving. How can you claim to love when you've abandoned the first person you were responsible for, yourself? In Plato's framework, desire is meant to be a ladder. It starts with attraction, yes, but it's supposed to climb higher, toward admiration of character, recognition of virtue, respect for the soul. The tragedy is that many men never climb. They cling to the first rung. They worship the rush, the image, the validation. And when that intensity fades, as it always does, they're left confused, angry, or bitter. They insist the woman changed. But the truth is simpler. He never truly knew her. He only knew his projection. Men fall first because they value speed over depth. They rush. They confess too early. They pledge loyalty before seeing how she handles boredom, pressure, temptation, and time. And in that hurry, they don't lose her. They lose themselves first. They hand out titles before they've gathered any real evidence. They crown someone a queen before ever seeing how she behaves in a storm. Plato would have called that a kind of political insanity. You wouldn't place a city in the hands of an untested ruler, yet men do something far riskier every day. They surrender their hearts to strangers without hesitation. Look closely and another pattern reveals itself. Many men, deep down, don't truly believe they are worthy of being desired at all. So when someone comes along who makes them feel chosen, that feeling becomes terrifying to lose. Fear quietly transforms into devotion. Not devotion to love, but devotion to avoiding abandonment. They aren't protecting the relationship. They're guarding the fantasy of, I'm finally not alone, no matter the cost. And what follows is almost inevitable. They excuse disrespect. They silence their instincts. They swallow words they should speak and tolerate behavior they know crosses their own boundaries. Not because they're foolish, but because they're starving. Plato understood this well. Hunger has a way of turning even a wise man into a beggar. That's the philosophical core of it all. The weaker a man's relationship with his own soul, the stronger his dependence becomes on whoever helps him forget that weakness, even temporarily. So when Plato warned men about desire, he wasn't preaching morality or condemning lust. He was pointing directly at the architecture of the male psyche and saying, if you build your sense of worth outside yourself, the first beautiful face that turns toward you will own you. He wasn't opposed to women. He was opposed to blindness. A man who cannot sit quietly with his own longing will always chase the loudest distraction. A man who never learned how to create meaning on his own will desperately search for someone else to assign it to him. A man without a vision for his life will turn any relationship into his sole mission. All she has to do is hint at withdrawal, and his entire world starts to collapse. That isn't love. That's dependency wearing poetic language. Plato offered another route, but it wasn't comfortable. He would ask a man to do something most never do when desire strikes. Pause. Not to kill the feeling, but to question it. To ask himself, what do I believe she will fix in me? What fear does her presence quiet? What wound does she touch? What story have I written about her that she's never actually spoken aloud? That interrogation is uncomfortable because it strips away intoxication. But it also hands the reins back to the charioteer. And when a man practices that discipline, something shifts. He stops treating women as mystical saviors or cruel destroyers and begins to see them as human beings, full of contradictions, strengths, wounds, and shadows. He stops demanding perfection and starts looking for alignment. He stops falling first and starts observing first. In Plato's world, the wise man isn't the one who never feels desire. The wise man is the one who refuses to hand over his judgment to it. He listens carefully to how she speaks about other people. He watches how she behaves when there's nothing to gain. He notices what she finds entertaining, what she labels as drama, what she considers normal. He pays attention to whether she values truth over attention, loyalty over excitement, effort over comfort. None of this is possible if he's already kneeling inside, silently begging to be chosen. Men fall first because they approach love like gamblers instead of philosophers. They push all their chips onto one face, one moment, one feeling, then demand fate reward their risk. And when it doesn't, they blame women, modern culture, the times, everything except the part of themselves that rushed past discernment. Plato would simply shrug and remind them, you tried to build eternity on a mood. In his philosophy, eros was never meant to be a drug. It was meant to be a guide, pointing the soul toward higher goods. Desire should lead a man toward discipline, not chaos. Toward refinement, not collapse. Toward wisdom, not obsession with being wanted. So here is the hard lesson. If every time you desire a woman you start losing sleep, losing focus, losing self-respect, then you're not in love. You're running from unfinished work, from neglected areas of your life, from silence you never learned to sit in without distraction, without numbing, without chasing. Plato's message to men is precise and unforgiving. Before asking, does she want me? Ask, do I belong to myself yet? If your identity crumbles the moment she pulls away, that alone answers the question. True love, in a platonic sense, doesn't erase a man. It requires him. It demands that he knows what he lives for outside of her. It requires a standard for his own behavior that doesn't shift based on who he's trying to impress. It asks him to admire beauty without becoming its servant. The man who walks this path still desires women. He still feels fascination. He still feels that electric pull when connection appears. But he doesn't hand over the keys to his life in exchange for a feeling. He doesn't reorganize his entire existence around someone he barely knows. He doesn't confuse emotional intensity with genuine compatibility. He lets time reveal truth. He allows reality to speak louder than fantasy. He lets character outweigh chemistry. And in that space, something interesting happens. Women respond differently. Some lose interest quickly because he cannot be easily controlled, guilt, or pulled off center. Others become more curious because his presence isn't desperate, it's grounded. He isn't auditioning. He's evaluating as much as he's offering. He's willing to walk away from anything that violates his values, no matter how attractive it looks. Plato would say that man has moved a little closer to the good. He has learned how to reshape desire. What once pulled him toward darkness now becomes a light, one that reveals truth, not just about her, but about himself. He no longer rushes forward blindly. He doesn't fall first. He stands first. He observes first. And if one day he chooses to kneel, it is never from emptiness or need, but from recognition, from seeing a soul strong enough to walk beside his without weakening him. Desire will always come knocking. It always does. It arrives dressed as beauty, softness, laughter timed just right, attention that feels warm and intoxicating. Plato never told men to silence that voice. He warned them to listen more carefully, to ask what desire is trying to expose. Every time attraction ignites, a man should pause and ask himself, what part of me is awakening right now? Is this my hunger speaking or my vision? Is it an old wound stirring or hard-earned wisdom rising? If the answer is hunger, slow down. If the answer is wounds, step back. But if the answer is clarity and purpose, then move forward, calmly with your eyes open. Men collapse when they rush to offer parts of themselves that are still unfinished. Men rise when they guard their soul, even while their heart beats faster. That is the real warning hidden inside Plato's philosophy. Desire itself is not the threat. The danger lies in trading your entire future for a fleeting moment of feeling complete, never realizing that the only person capable of completing you was already looking back through your own eyes. There is something unsettling about this truth. A man can walk through his entire life believing he is the one making choices, only to discover much later that desire has been choosing for him all along. Plato believed that unexamined desire behaves like a hidden architect. It sketches the blueprint of a man's decisions long before he realizes he's building anything. And by the time he notices the pattern, the structure is already towering over him, casting a shadow he can't escape. Desire creates its own logic, not the logic of reason, but the logic of yearning. It bends perception. It rearranges priorities. It convinces a man that what he wants must be good for him. Yet those two things rarely align. A man may want beauty, but beauty may cost him peace. A man may crave closeness, but closeness may suffocate his purpose. A man may desire a woman, while she desires everything he has not yet learned to protect. This is the deeper tragedy Plato pointed toward. Men mistake emotional urgency for destiny, and the moment emotion replaces purpose, a man becomes vulnerable, not to women, but to himself. Plato believed a man must learn to sit inside his longing without immediately escaping it through another person. Because a man who cannot hold his hunger will eventually beg to be fed. And begging, Plato warned, is the quickest way a man forgets his dignity. But the man who can endure desire without collapsing into it, this man becomes something else entirely. Plato described him as the one who steps outside the cave. A man who sees the fire behind the shadows instead of worshiping the shadows themselves. A man who understands that desire is a signal, not a command. When a man reaches this level of awareness, something extraordinary happens. He stops falling. He begins to move with intention instead of desperation. His voice carries weight because it no longer bargains with emptiness. His presence sharpens because fantasy no longer dilutes it. His eyes see reality, not projections. This is the transformation Plato wanted men to reach, the point where desire becomes a servant, not a ruler. Because the truth is simple, women do not make men fall. Men fall because they run toward desire the way thirsty travelers chase a mirage, forgetting that not everything that glitters is water. Plato never wanted men to become cold or detached. He never preached avoidance. He taught awareness, the kind that allows a man to want without worshiping, to feel without drowning, to love without losing the structure of his own identity. And here is the final lesson Plato left behind. If you lose yourself chasing beauty, beauty will not stay to help you find your way back. Desire rewards the grounded and devours the lost. The man who stays anchored in himself is the one desire can never command. And when a woman encounters that kind of man, she feels it immediately, not as coldness, not as ego, but as unshakable strength. The kind that doesn't bend simply because beauty passes by. So remember Plato's warning, dark and timeless. Don't chase the glow, let the glow reveal itself. Don't collapse at the spark, become the fire that stands on its own ground. Because the moment a man learns to walk with desire instead of being dragged by it, everything changes. He stops reaching, he stops falling first, and he begins to be chosen. If this message reached you, if it unsettled something you felt but never named, don't let it fade into silence. Like the video, share it with a man who needs this clarity right now. And subscribe to Epic Persona for insights that don't soothe the ego, but sharpen the soul. Move with discipline, stand with purpose, and let your presence speak long before your words ever do.